If you could go back and change history, would you do it? I mean, a lot of us would. I've made mistakes in my past. I'd love to go back and kind of erase or make up for some of the bad things I've done. And a lot of times they weren't intentional. Like I hurt somebody's feelings. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but then later came to understand I was hurting somebody's feelings. I'd love to go back and correct that wrong. But the reality is time is a straight line. You're moving forward on it. You can't go back and correct your mistakes, and you probably shouldn't even if you could, because that's how we learn. Which is why I'm kind of I'm puzzled and troubled a little bit by word that we're going to get a lot of editing of comics in the near future. That comics are going to go back and make a very concerted effort with their digital reproductions, with their trades, to remove insensitive depictions of characters, to polish up things that are racist, and to try and make comics a little bit more inclusive. Are they accomplishing that goal? Is it doing that? That's what we're going to talk about. Hey, everybody, this is Perch. Anytime you're talking about race, I think it's important that you realize one important thing. It is your personal viewpoint. You're not speaking for the masses. And a lot of people do that. They say, well, this isn't racist, and that's how everybody should feel. That's not how it works. We all have our different opinions. And what you should do in life is you should try and do the best you can. And you should try and be good to your fellow man, whatever their color or gender or whatever it happens to be. And you should try and be a stand-up person. That's what you should try and do. And your sensibilities may differ from others, and it's not your responsibility to tell other people how to live. Your goal number one is to live the best life you can. I'm saying this, I lead with that because what I'm about to say, a lot of this stuff on race, it's certainly my opinion, and I don't expect it to be yours. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and that's okay. If I say something stupid, I mean, this is an open invitation always for every topic, by the way. Please correct me. No, I'm not saying you need to educate me on what racism is. I think that's insulting when people say that to other people. Like, tell me how I'm racist. Just shut up with that. But if I say something dumb, I'd like to be called on it. I'd like somebody to say, hey, I've been thinking. That's how I learn. So I would appreciate it. Right now we're in a big amount of civil unrest in our country. We've got, because of, the actions of a horrible policeman who murdered a guy that was murder. Now we have it's once again shown the light on a lot of troubling behavior. I do not believe the country is racist and evil to its core. I don't believe its foundations are inherently evil or racist. I don't believe that. I know some people are saying that. I definitely don't believe it. But I do believe there are bad people out there, and I think our system is supposed to punish bad people. And when it doesn't, when that system fails us, we have to hold those people accountable. And that's a little bit what's happening now, but of course it's ballooned out into a much bigger topic. That's what happens when, unfortunately, when you're in an election year and things get highly politicized and you have people cooped up and can't take it anymore with the various lockdowns and other things. This is what results is kind of this reaction. I don't say an overreaction. To me, big parts of it, certainly looting and other things, are an overreaction. But once again, I'm not going to tell somebody else how they can feel. This is a horrible thing that happened. But one of the parts to this conversation is the idea that we need to go through and we need to take a harder look at our media and our entertainment and really scrub it clean of things that are racially insensitive or racist, depending on what spectrum that's at. So HBO announces, hey, Gone with the Wind is going to get pulled. We're not going to have that out anymore. And Marvel Comics and DC Comics, and Marvel, I spoke too fast. I haven't heard anything from DC, although I've heard rumblings in the past from editors and other people I've talked to that this is coming. We have heard some comments from Marvel that they're going to basically go and continue to look through their catalog and make sure they're not continuing to put into print things that are racist. Now, with comics, comics have a history. Of course, they've been around for a very long time. Whenever you have something that's been around for many decades, you're going to have different cultural takes. Something that was acceptable and cool in the 20s is not acceptable and cool in the 2020s. It's just it's the sensibilities have changed, and sometimes those things are racist, and sometimes they're not. And I'll give you two examples, and it's important that we recognize as a society the difference between these two things. Back in the 40s, there were comics where Superman would fly in, and there would be a bunch of super stereotypical Asian characters, drawn hunched over, giant buck teeth, big glasses, yellow colored skin, and just they were racist caricatures. Captain Marvel had very racist depictions of black people. Mickey Mouse would go and meet black. I mean, incredibly racist cartoons. I say racist because these characters are drawn in stereotypical ways. And now, granted, back in the 40s, that art style and that depiction of different races was considered acceptable. But even though it was considered acceptable, people knew that was racist. They were making fun of a race. I mean, everybody was aware of what was going on. The parody of a race was what was going on there. Maybe it was people thought it was acceptable to parody a race because we were at war with them or whatever else, but it was still a parody. So that's like camp number one. Camp number two is a weird one. Now, maybe you've heard about the controversy with Wendy's. Now, what's Wendy's? Wendy's is a hamburger joint, and their logo is a girl that wears like a blue and white striped dress and has red hair. And recently, there's been some concern that it is a stereotypical Irish person that is the mascot. That she's Irish. Now, that one I think is different. I think you'd have to really be stretching to look at the Wendy's mascot, the cartoon image of the Wendy's girl, and think Irish. I mean, maybe, but it's not what I thought. And I highly doubt the owners of Wendy's, the founders, the people who came up with that logo were like, hey, let's stick it to the Irish people. Because as you know, Wendy's is an Irish restaurant place. No, I mean, of course not. It's a hamburger joint. So, I mean, there's an example where the culture has now viewing things through a certain lens where they're looking for, racist depictions of people or looking for things that are offensive, but they did not start out that way. And maybe at one point we decide as a society, hey, if you draw people with red hair, that's racist, and that's just what we decide as a society. Okay, but that doesn't mean that back in time, back in the 60s and 70s or whenever the Wendy's logo was created, does not mean that person had evil in their hearts or was influenced in any way by wanting to make fun of Irish people. I think those are two really important examples because as you look through comics, there's examples of things that are clearly these stereotypical racial drawings of people. And then there are things that now just through today's lens seem offensive or bad to me, not me, but us, bad to people. An example of one of this might be Luke Cage. Now that's an interesting one because in the 70s, there was a lot of blaxploitation films and, had, there's Shaft and other things as movies. And so Luke Cage had a dialect that was kind of fit right in line with those. Now, a lot of blaxploitation films, it was given that label for a reason. It's black exploitation. That's kind of that was the name. It was right there in the name. And it's certainly a lot of black creators worked on those films, so it's not like it's slavery in the 70s, but it definitely. Once again, it's a parody, and people knew what they were doing at the time. So Luke Cage is in the comics, and there's a panel. One of my favorite panels with him back in the 70s. He's standing next to Dr. Doom, and he's going, "Give me my money, honey." And it's a hilarious panel because you kind of do get the sense Luke Cage could go over there and beat the hell out of Dr. Doom if he wanted to, and take his money, which would be pretty funny of a comic. They always have like Squirrel Girl beating up the villains. Like, why not Luke Cage? Like, let's have Luke Cage get really pissed off and just go beat the crap out of Ultron and some of these other characters. That'd be great. I would buy that series. I'm just saying. Anyway, so that's one of the panels people point to as like, well, maybe this is inappropriate. Maybe we need to go through there and change the word bubble to, pardon me, sir, I would like to be paid for my work. I don't know what they would put in there. But does that make sense? It's tough to know where to draw the line between like, hey, maybe we shouldn't put this picture of Superman punching the Japanese on T-shirts, and maybe we shouldn't put that on the cover of the graphic novel because it does seem pretty offensive. And maybe we want to, not reprint this story of Lois Lane going in blackface to, research what it's like to be black. Maybe that's not a good idea either. But I don't know. Again, everybody has a different line. But when you start to get to, hey, let's re-letter Luke Cage's dialogue, or let's go. There's some comments at they're talking about like the Matt Fraction run of Iron Man. This would be 2010, 2009, somewhere in that range, that Matt Fraction's use of the Mandarin was racist. Really? I mean, do we really think so? I have a hard time with that. Like, I feel like that's a stretch. And so it creates unfortunately, it creates this path where we're constantly editing, and kind of to what I said at the very, very beginning, if we're constantly editing these things, are we learning? Like, are we learning why that stuff is bad, or are we just learning that when the mood of the country changes, we need to hustle and edit them? I don't think that's a good lesson. Now, some people have asked me in the past, what do I think about the Confederate statues that are around the country, or Christopher Columbus, or things like that? And the people are now tearing them down, and they're decapitating them and pulling the statues and everything. And how do I feel about those? Shouldn't those come down? And I want to just lay out my thought process here. On one hand, I do think history is important, and this is part of our history. And I think that when you go in and you say, let's tear down all of our history, I think that starts to get to be, like we said, a slippery slope, where, hey, we're gonna tear down the statue of the slave owner. Okay, all right, fine, checks out. But tomorrow, are we tearing down the Washington Monument? Because there are some people saying that should be torn down because it's a symbol of kind of male domination in Washington, D.C. Is it? Is that what they were thinking when they built that thing? I don't think so. I don't think that a bunch of people in D.C. were like, hey, let's put a giant penis here. I don't think that was what was going through their minds. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. So I think it's dangerous to get into this. At the same time, and I think this is a point that a lot of people miss when they're talking about the statues, is that if you are, say, a black woman, black man, black child, and you are walking to school or whatever, and you have to pass this statue monument to a person who fought for the Confederacy every day, that kind of sucks. I'm just saying. I think that that does kind of suck. To the point, the Germans did take down the statues of Hitler. They thought, oh, we're not, he lost, so we're going to go ahead and take those out because it doesn't seem like the right thing to do to have them up here. Probably would bother some people. And so I can jump on board with the idea of some of these people who fought for slavery, who owned slaves, who were super racist. I can okay, yeah, I actually can sign on to the idea that maybe, just maybe, we ought to take those statues down. I know some people say that is part of our history. You ought to preserve our history. Yeah, but it goes back to, like, why was that statue built? Was it built to say, hey, here is a big asshole who did some nice things for the town, certainly put some money into it, but also was fought for slaves? He's a dick. Does the plaque say this guy here is a dick? Let's all remember him so we don't do this stuff again. Or does the plaque say, here's a brave soldier who helped fight for the Confederacy? Again, the people who are living there probably need to make that call. Definitely not somebody who lives, thousands of miles away in Los Angeles shouldn't be making that call. But, the residents, I think, should make that call. But I can get on board with the idea of, like, hey, maybe the monuments to the people who fought for something and lost should come down. Now, that doesn't mean you erase them from your museums. I think you absolutely cannot ignore your history. You cannot say, hey, let's just erase all of our history and pretend it didn't happen. That is a definite recipe for problems down the road. But, nobody's, I would hope nobody's suggesting going into museums, editing the textbooks and all the rest to kind of wipe this stuff clean. I would hope nobody's doing that, because that would be stupid. But, big monuments to slave owners, yeah, sure, take them down. I'm on board with that. I think they should be taken down in a responsible way, not, a mob goes and kind of ties ropes around them and pulls it off and the statue falls on one of the protesters. I think that's just stupid, but, whatever people need to do. So we're way far from comics, but I just want to throw this out there because it's an interesting conversation. It's one that's coming up more and more lately. And it's, at what point do you make these changes? And is there a line, and where do you draw the line? You've heard my opinion on all the matter. I'm sure, like I said, race is definitely a personal opinion for everybody, and so that's why I'm sure you have a different opinion of mine. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know where I've got it right, got it wrong, and again, no judgment. You get to make your own choice. This is mine. I've thought about it quite a lot, but I'd love to hear yours. Meanwhile, hey, like, subscribe if you'd care to. Follow me on Twitter or Facebook at Comic Perch. You can send me an email at comics with an S Perch at gmail.com. Thanks for listening.